All right, thanks for joining us here on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Help me welcome Ryan Banta, rhymes with Santa. I love that you told me that, by the way, because I'm going to use that. Ryan, how are you, friend?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on today. I look forward to talking to you.
You know, our listeners won't be able to see this, but if you're watching on YouTube, your shirt is the best shirt I have ever seen. It says Father, like Thor, the god of lightning or whatever. I actually wrote an article on LinkedIn about is Thor the god of hammer, and it was all about hammer cages and stuff. So I love that your kids got that for you, man. You need a little bit more beard and flowing locks to hit the whole Thor motif, though.
Absolutely. I don't have the hair necessarily that matches it up, but I do have a love for the Marvel comics and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a big fan of that. And as a kid, I was like, man, if we could just put all these movies together and make it like a television series, but through movies, that would be amazing. And so it's been so much fun to kind of do that. Now, none of my kids have seen it. They're too young to see that stuff.
Yeah,
But
sure, yeah.
when they get of age, we are definitely going to be going through the 22 movie saga for sure.
We're doing the same thing. I got a 9-year-old, and we're getting close to where we can do that. We did that with Star Wars. We did all 9 or 10 or whatever there is now. We ran through them in chronologically, by watching Darth Vader grow up as a kid and all that kind of stuff. So sorry if that was a spoiler alert, by the way. That was Darth Vader the whole time. Sorry, kids. I should have labeled that. You mentioned Marvel? Did you collect comic books when you were growing up?
I watched a lot of they had the X-Men cartoon, which kind of really popularized Wolverine and all of that. I went back and got more comic books later. I was kind of a collector of Hot Wheels cars and things that went fast. I was always interested in that growing up, even as a little guy. My dad had a Ford Mustang GT, and, he was kind of my superhero and my Thor, if you will. He's a big, huge power lifter and played rugby, and he was really fast for a big guy. So I was always kind of like, even in early on, really obsessed with speed and performance and things like that. But I have now got my Comixology and my subscription to that and all that stuff. I go back and read the comics and listen to YouTube videos about it and comics explained, because I'm just so into it. And then I can listen and drive, and have those stories told to me that way, which is a lot of fun.
All right. That's cool. I love your description of your dad. Holy cow. And if you're listening right now and you have heard Ryan on different podcasts, I think he's got the record for most amount of guests, man. But by the way, I need to encourage you. You got to stop being a guest, Ryan. You got to start making your own. You got to create your own podcast, man. That would be fantastic. Honestly, that would be really.
Well, I've been told I have a face for radio, so I do have a good voice. I do know that. I do like to talk a lot and all that. Robbie, I guess it was in the fall last year, really pushed on me to do that. So that's probably something that will be happening in the future. But I want to make sure I do right by my guests, just like you do, and make sure that I have a format that makes sense. I don't want to waste people's time, but that's in the works for sure.
Good. That's really good to hear. I'm all about increasing value. So if there's someone out there that I think has value to give, and you are certainly one of those people, Ryan, I would always encourage that type of medium to give value. So if you've heard Ryan before on podcast, you've heard, he's the author of a really great book called Sprinters Compendium. I had to go look up what the word compendium meant. It basically means a bunch of stuff all together that gives value. So I love that. That actually was a really cool. I don't know how you stumbled on that. Were you an English major or an English teacher? How did you find the word compendium?
Well, we'll get into it, but no, again, kind of the Dungeons and Dragons. There's a book or a company called Palladium Books, and they had these compendiums, which was the collection of like all their dimensional beings or their magic or their weapons. And so that was kind of my, homage to my history of like, hey, I'm making a compendium for sprinters, So it's kind of going back to my love of science and fantasy kind of growing up and that kind of stuff. So that's where that came from. And it was a collectible. Now, I didn't entirely coin that. Carl Valley, who is a very, well-known figure in the sports community, he and I were batting around different ideas over a decade ago about what a book like this would look like. And that's kind of how we came up with that name together. And I have no idea if he's a fan of Rifts or Palladium Books or Dungeons and Dragons, but I certainly was. And that really rung true with me based on some of the things I did as a kid.
I'll have to have Carl on the show one day in the future, and we'll have to figure that out. Yeah. Well, I love that. We're not here to talk about training. First of all, that would be wasted for you, listener, because to have training talk with me, I know nothing about sprints and hurdles and jumps and all that. Well, actually, I say that, and I was gonna, I just ruined it all because I'm gonna put you on the spot. What is the best part of your book, Sprinters Compendium?
Well, I think it's probably, when it comes to, a lot of people have told me the weight room. So Otto
That's the
Boland was one of,
wrong answer. The number one best thing about the book Sprinters Compendium is that yours truly, your humbled host here,
oh,
Cunningham,
shoot.
is in the book.
I should have known where you were taking me.
Well,
I'm so sorry about that.
This interview has been real fun, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed these 5 minutes because, boy, I've never had a guest.
Oh, no. And I knew that was coming too, and I totally blew it.
We will talk about the book and how you got the idea and things like that. But I wanted to spend some time, Ryan, with you, ribbing you a little bit. I knew that was going to work. I knew it. But I wanted to learn more about you as Ryan Banta, the person and the coach, and how you got into track and field and that kind of stuff. So maybe I like to use a little catchphrase. Let's get in our Wayback Machine and let's go back. Can I assume you did track and field in high school? And if so, where'd you grow up? What events? Tell me about that.
All right, so I'm going to go way, way, way back.
Uh-oh.
As a kid growing up, I early on didn't have a lot of friends because I was a very emotional kid. I could cry easily. Bullies liked to pick on me because I was sensitive, and probably also because I was a pretty big kid. So it was a way of them kind of establishing their kind of dominance in that social circle or whatever. And I oftentimes attribute sports to saving my life, not to get too heavy early on, but it really became the main focal point of my identity where I could be cool for once, being good at basketball at a young age. Because I was in the 99 percentile in height and weight until I was basically, up until 6th grade. So I was like the center on my basketball team, then went to the power forward, then the short forward, then shooting guard, point guard, to on the bench to off the team by the time I was a junior in high school. But I was big early and strong early. But kids like to poke fun at me and mess with me. And I probably had 3 really good friends until I started to do sports and athletics. And that gave me the confidence to build my life. It was a structure and a scaffolding for me to build my identity, my ego per se, and who I was as a person. And one of the things, even as a little guy, that I realized is now that I have this ability, now that I am athletic and people like me because I'm athletic, I'm not going to ever be somebody who's disliked through that. Now that might have changed as I grew up, and we can kind of talk about that more moving forward, but we go through these different evolutions as people all the time. So as a kid, go ahead.
You're talking a lot about basketball. Was track at all in the picture at this point, or was it all basketball and maybe other sports?
Well, I didn't realize I was fast until I was able to take down my good friend and the fastest kid in school, Nodrick Tankins, on field day.
Oh, wait, we just called him out.
Oh, yeah, he knows. I love him. He's a good man. And he was like the best athlete in our school young because he was just like me, early mature, very athletic. And we had this rivalry because, until field day, in PE, you're kind of racing each other and doing what kids do, right? It's so much fun. And when I was able to, and people knew how good he was. And so when I finally beat him, and pretty substantially, that was like, kids were like, holy cow. And, instantly you start to feel good about yourself. And then that built to something that I wanted to do more because I always liked speed anyway. I liked the feel of speed. My neighbor who lived next door to me lived like 2 houses down. He was one of those 3 friends I told you about. I would love to call him up and see if I could come over and play at his house because he always had all the cool toys and all that kind of stuff. And we could like have the whole run of his basement. So I would try to get to his house before he could get to the front door. And I loved jumping over my bushes in the front of my house and sprinting as fast as I could down the street and feeling the wind in my hair that no longer is here. And you kind of felt like time slowed down but it was like the coolest feeling to go that fast. It's
Wow.
still one of the most exciting and arousal things you can do. It feels awesome.
You
And so
know,
that became
I,
very attractive.
I sprinted once, in high school, and I never got that feeling. It felt the very opposite. It felt like mud and, vines holding me back. Man, I wish I'd have got that feeling. I never did. Well, take us to when's the first time track and field started becoming, when did you start formalizing this running, this speed?
So the presidential test that we used to do, we would do the mile and do all of that. So I actually had a really good mile when I was young too. Now I have a terrible mile. I won a bet with my kids, but the bet meant I had to run a 5K. I told them that if these kids finished this high in state and all this kind of stuff, and it was all these crazy things, and they ended up checking off all the boxes. I
Oh,
had to go run a 5K. It was awful. But younger me, when I was in much better aerobic shape, that was one of those things that was really attractive. And I said, man, this is something I'm very good at. I didn't do any kind of summer track or USATF outside of, there was a thing called the Hershey Games.
mm-hmm.
And in our state of Missouri, me and another young man, we broke the previous records in the Hershey Games in the 100 and the 200. And at that
Wow.
point, he ended up being a great high school track and field athlete as well. But we realized, oh, wow, I am actually really, really fast. And that became, again, part of my identity and something that I had those great visions as a little kid of being in the Olympic finals versus Carl Lewis and, all that kind of stuff growing up. And obviously that isn't where it went for me, but that was,
Spoiler alert, everybody.
yeah, but it was something that was really fun and something that really mattered to me. And then in middle school, we had our little intramurals versus the other middle schools because we have 4 high schools in Parkway. And I had a lot of success there in front of all of my peers. And, you felt super cool on that day. So those moments really hardwired me into the love of track and field.
So we know you're teaching and coaching at Parkway Central. So you grew up in this area as well?
Yeah. So
Wow.
we never, growing up, I didn't think that this is where I was going to go. But yeah, I have the pleasure of coaching and teaching in the community in which I went to. And now I live in the community as well. My wife and I, last September, we moved in here because I want to be a part of the community. I don't want to just talk the
Wow.
talk. I want to walk the walk and be fully vested in this community that I serve so much.
That is that's special. I mean, when I grew up, me and my brother, best friend who's like my brother, we made a pact that we would not stay in our community. First chance we would get out of there, and we did, buddy. Let me tell you, that's special though. That not only you did it, but it was this place that you wanted to. Like this was like you kind of had that idea. That's really cool.
Well, and
So
it's twofold too. I mean, kind of like what you said. Part of it is, I wanted to go back because there's so much value there now. But part of it also, I went through some really tough things and I was bullied and I was picked on and all these kind of things. So the other part of it is I want to make sure that I can mitigate as much of those behaviors for the kids that I work with. I can help as many of the kids that feel kind of outcasted or in a weird spot. And so for me, spiritually, that's really important, that I want to make sure that I can reach and teach these kids every day in a community and also share with them the really good things that I experienced as well.
So what did you end up, you said you did some mile stuff for the presidential fitness test. You were fast. The wind was blowing through your hair. What events did you end up doing through high school track and field?
So I was definitely a sprint guy. I was a tailback on the football team as well. And, speed was a big part of who I was, looking back on it, obviously, and kind of my training philosophy, I definitely was a 400-meter guy, but I wanted to be really great at the 100 and 200. And that was something that I spent a lot of time doing. And I was very, very fast, young, and wasn't the best trainer, didn't dial in the warm-ups and cool downs like you should as a kid, but man, when it came time to run intervals, I'd run till I puked every practice.
Wow, man. I remember, it just reminded me, we were doing my senior year. I had a good friend on the team back in high school, Kevin Betts. He ended up running for Georgia Tech, so he was pretty good. He was state champ his senior year, I think, in the mile down in Alabama. we were doing quarter repeats with like a 200-meter walk or whatever. This is how one person who takes track serious and one person who doesn't. I'll let you guess who's who. So we're running, we're doing our 200-meter walk, and I'm chatting it up because I didn't run all that fast. And my buddy Kevin goes, "Hey, hold on a second." And he turns to the infield and just throws up, looks back, and he's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Dude," I was like, "You are doing this wrong, man. Something's wrong. You should not be throwing up."
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I did my, 90-second quarter or whatever I was doing. I don't know.
And for our listeners, we don't want our kids to puke all the time. That's not what we're saying.
No,
Unfortunately,
no.
it's just part of it.
It's a philosophy though. There's, I see it on social media. I'm a huge social media advocate, and I see coaches that is that's their trophy for the day when they can get their kids to throw up. And I'm kind of the opposite as well. I think that maybe that's not right. But again, who am I? I'm not coaching anymore either. There may be a reason for that. Anyway, we said we are not you. I knew you were going to do this. You're into trade discussion, dadgummit, Ryan Banta. So you're running high school track.
Yeah.
So I was you're a running back. Talk to me about when did, or at any point this time, you're a teacher. So was teaching, going to college and becoming a teacher, was coaching at all? Where were you at sitting on that kind of thinking?
So looking back on it, there were things that obviously made sense that this is the path I eventually would come to. Obviously my love of speed, my love of performance, my love for athleticism, my ego being tied into performance itself, and kind of my confidence and everything. But also one of the things I did as a high school athlete, I was really good as a freshman. I was on the varsity team. We went to state. I was a contributor to our conference championships and all this kind of stuff as a freshman. And it's kind of a funny story because I remember I talked to Coach Warren, who's a Hall of Fame coach. He was my high school coach. He and I still coach together. He's the boys coach at Central. I'm the girls coach. And when I was an athlete for him, before we even had our first season or practice, I said, and I knew how good I was. This is kind of how a kid's mindset. I was like, well, do you think I got a really good shot at varsity? And I mean, he laughed me out of the room. He's like, there's no way. Well, I had no idea. I had no idea that this was probably the best team that he had ever put together. So the likelihood of a freshman boy, which is not very typical in a big school, to be on varsity. And I just was like so offended. I was like, what the heck? Well, of course, as it would play out, I did end up making that. And I was a big contributor to the team as a freshman. And that was really cool. But in terms of my coaching and kind of where I went, I also was trying to recruit all the fastest kids I could at our school to be a part of the team with me. I was almost like a mini coach for him before we ever even got started. And I continued that throughout my high school career in terms of, junior and senior year. We had a young man that he blew my doors off. Now imagine I was that Hershey Games guy as a middle schooler. And in my middle school, there was a kid who just dusted me, and his name was Deron Davis. Well, as luck would have it, eventually we convinced Deron's mom to let him do sports. And he came out his junior year, and he was, as I thought, one of the fastest kids in the state. But by the time he was a senior, he was a state record holder in the 400-meter dash and Gatorade Athlete of the Year. And so I always kind of felt like I was a part of that experience beyond my performances because I spent a lot of time hurt, but I felt like I could help by getting the best kids out from our school because I had so many friends from so many diverse backgrounds. I could kind of pull from a lot of different places. And so looking back on it, it's like, oh yeah, I was already doing that. And I was frustrated. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's a real, like when I hear that, I hear a lot of maturity for a freshman. So what, 14-ish years old? Certainly some kids will, hey, my best friend, you're coming with me, you're running track because I'm running track, those kind of things. But to like actively seek out and be like, well, hey man, that guy's better than me, but that'll make our team better. So I need to go get him or her on the team. That's a different level of maturity for that age.
Yeah, and as kids, we're all in different places in that, right? So that's one of the beautiful things about like the theory of multiple intelligences. Like certain kids are really strong at certain areas as they're getting educated. And so when we dismiss young people for maybe a behavior over here, darn it, they're really good over here, but you never give them a chance as an educator to kind of show you what their strengths are and appreciate them for that. that's a lesson to be learned, because there were lots of things that thank God there was no social media when I was growing up, and things that I just needed to grow up. But for sure, in terms of how important I felt team was and how important I felt it was for our school to be great, like I had articles all over my wall of all of my teammates and classmates that were in the newspapers, because I was just so prideful of them. And also in a way, they inspired me, but they also made me feel good about the place I was at and what I kind of, in a small way, helped create, for the school. And so and again, never thought I was going to be a teacher in high school. That wasn't the goal. I knew I was going to run track in college. I got an opportunity to participate in football, but that was really it. Where I've come to happens later.
Before we get to college, you said something that intrigued me there. It seems like it's actually really important as well. You said the theory of multi-dimensional learning.
Yeah, multiple intelligences. So Howard Gardner talked about this.
Explain that. Yeah.
So what the idea is that it's a kid's interests typically show also where they're probably going to be the strongest academically or performance-based. So like there's social intelligence, which like one of my friends, Kevin Lewis, he's been in 18 different weddings. That guy has social intelligence. He may not ever be a rocket scientist in physics or anything like that, and he is a smart guy. But social intelligence-wise, he's off the charts. So there's something to be learned from a kid like that. Kinesthetic awareness, a kid who can just move really well, and has that. It just seems like they're naturally talented. Or a kid who's great at artwork or reading or the ability to speak. So there's all these different hemispheres that Howard Gardner kind of figured out. He also wrote a book, which was, I think it was called The 6 Minds for the Future. And so one of the minds that really stuck with me was synergist, and we can maybe talk about that. But I like to look at that because when we talk about the sport of track and field or coaching, you're going to come across so many different people in your line of work. They all have gifts, they all have worthiness, and we should honor that in the way that we treat them and raise their voices in the way that they want them raised, and really compliment them on their strengths, because that's the idea. It's not equal outcomes per se, it's equity to allow kids to flourish in the ways that they want to flourish. And so that really resonated with me as an educator.
Yeah, how do we do that? And I know you're coming from a high school, so we're going to think in the realms of 14 to 18-year-olds. How do we identify which hemisphere, which of the 6 minds, which of the multiple intelligences, and then once we do identify that, what should as leaders, as teachers and coaches, what should our roles be to expand those or to amplify them?
Well, this is a good conversation, because now that I am in Parkway and I can go to the school board meetings and probably not get fired by keeping things positive, I think that just like coaching, we should test young people academically beyond the standardized testing to figure out what they're really great at. And so one of the things they do is they'll have that test where they ask you what are your interests are and all that kind of stuff. But kids, they know what it is. They know what it is. And so some kids that maybe don't have academic interest in being in physical building and hearing Mr. Banta go on and on about Julius Caesar, they may be more willing to do something they really, really enjoy performatively and show it to you. So like in my own classroom, how I try to do that is I'll have my, multiple guest test, but then I also have every semester I have a unit that tries to touch on those multiple intelligences. So I'll do, where the kids have to make a history rap, where the kids will have to create a propaganda poster from World War I, where the kids create a news show for the Great Depression. They'll create a radio show like Good Morning Vietnam for the Vietnam era. And you put them in these situations. We as academics and administrators in education should be doing that stuff way in advance to figure out what the kids really enjoy so that we can build them up and create schemes of tests and performative measures to figure that out, besides choose A, B, C, or D. And we should be doing that much earlier than high school. And what that plays out as would then be student choice academically, more student choice, even within the curriculum itself. Like, hey, all right, you give me the baseline of American history, but I want to dive into revolutions. So I want to do these activities on revolution. And they should have a lot of freedom to decide how that's going to look. And the teacher becomes more of a guide on the side as opposed to a sage on the stage. Now, the listeners listening know I tend to be a sage on the stage. So I work against that by creating these interactive projects so that I can be the guide on the side. So those are some ideas.
That's good self-awareness that you realize, and you're a history major, which sounds like it probably lends itself to being a sage on a stage. But you have that self-awareness of like, I'm not reaching all my kids this way. So I have to, if I'm going to be a good educator, I need to try to do X, Y, and Z. It makes me think, non-educator here. There's this comic or something, like comic strip. And it was something like there's an elephant and a fish or something like that. I'm getting it all screwed up. And it basically said, the test is the A goes to the creature that can swim, and the elephant's like, well, I can't. He's like, well, you get an F. And it's like, really? That elephant has no worth? That elephant fails because he can't swim? It's not designed to swim. Guess what? If you gave the test to move heavy objects, the elephant would pass with flying colors. I'm butchering. Do you know that comic at all? I'm butchering it.
I do know what you're saying, and I think I've seen that image before, or at least something that relates to that. But that's exactly, I mean, again, we're not going to talk about training, but that's exactly where the philosophy that I've been beating the drum on with this critical mass is, where you kind of guide, you test, you figure out what the athletes are good at, you move them in a direction, and then you build the training around them. It's just like you could do that in the classroom. What are the kids' interests? Now you still got to give them the experience of all of those things. I totally believe in the liberal arts education and touching on all these things and having Renaissance kids, which means they're good at a lot of things and have a lot of experience. But I also want to then be able to value, man, you're really good at this. This is something you need to make part of your life. Like, there's so many kids that could rap that never knew they could rap, And I'm at a really diverse school, where that isn't necessarily.
Are you one of them?
Oh no. Well, I do a great "Mama Said Knock You Out" rendition. I won't do it for the audience to ruin their ears here, but every birthday, minus this COVID summer, we go out and do karaoke, and that's "Mama Said Knock You Out," "Ice Ice Baby," "Jump Around."
First of all, you cannot do "Ice Ice Baby" because that's not. Second of all, I have no idea. We're in the middle of this interview, this conversation right now, so I don't know if there's another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't know. But if you're listening right now, if you make it near to the end, I am going to do everything I can to get Ryan to Acapulco. I can't even say the word. I'm going to get him. I'm going to use all my powers to get him to sing "Mama Said Knock You Out" by the great LL Cool J. So hopefully you'll stick around and see if I was successful or not. I wrote the note is right here, man. I will not forget that. Here it is. Okay, that was super interesting. Let's go back. We were talking about you're getting ready to go into college. So tell me about the college selection process. Where'd you end up going? And you said you played football, I think, in college as well. So tell me about all that.
So I had a lot of injuries when I was in high school. I tore my hamstring as bad as you can tear it. And I was never really able to stay healthy after my sophomore year of high school. I was able to put a couple things together here or there. My senior football season went really, really well, even though I became a backup to a guy who was a starter, a true freshman starter at Mizzou, and another guy who was like all Big 8 at the time, or Big 12. He was a fullback. And so I was amongst some pretty talented individuals. And, we won conference in football, and, won our district title as a senior in football as well. And we were able to win a district title in track. And I was a participant and a contributor to the football team, for sure, my senior year. I just never was able to stay healthy, especially for track and field. And then my coach that I love so much, who's in the Hall of Fame, he got really sick with an intestinal disease that they ended up having to put him in the hospital for both of the seasons, my junior and senior year. And so I lost basically the most important person in the building for me. And so it was really tough. And luckily, because we had a lot of talent and we had coaches that were willing to go up to the hospital, my buddy Glenn House, who was an assistant coach for the program, and he still coaches as well, he would go to Steve and talk with Steve every day to get the workouts back and bring him in, all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, I personally was unable to stay healthy, which is still one of those little itches in my soul, which has really led me to coach, which we'll talk about after college. But I was not where I wanted to be. So I wanted to go to a place where I could do choir, because I had a voice scholarship at a different university.
You were sure singing Mama Say. Get out of here.
This voice has been screamed out.
Keep going. Sorry.
But anyway, but I wanted to do, because my mom was a music teacher, and so I wanted to still do choir. And the university that I chose, Carthage College, I could participate in football, I could be a member of the track team, and it looked at the time like my schedule would work out where I could still do choir. Plus, being a guy who's been all over the Illinois and the CCIW and all that kind of stuff, people in Wisconsin are some of the nicest flipping people on the planet.
That's true.
And, and so when I walked in there, I was like, holy cow, this feels like home.
Cool.
And that college was right on Lake Michigan. And anybody who's hearing this, Carthage College is a great place. And one of the few places I ever missed is my college experience. Like high school, I was ready to leave when it was done, which is funny because now I'm there every day. But this is how the path works, right?
When you selected Carthage in choir and track and football and things like that, did you know you were going to go in to study education, or undecided at that point?
No, I was fully on board with the political track. I wanted to be a politician, and I wanted to be in public service. Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Let me just say, everybody listening right now, thank you for not going. We would have to not like you, man. Come on. Thank you.
As we talked offline, I don't know that I have a team right now, so to speak.
Well,
but
you add so much more value as a teacher. And we need politicians. I'm not poo-pooing on that, but I'm going to say a teacher is way more important. No doubt. Okay, so you were going political. So you were probably studying, I don't know, what does a politician study? Political science? Yeah,
I had a degree in political science, a minor in history, and a minor in Asian studies. And so again, philosophy, poetry, kind of Eastern ideas, right? I was really intrigued by that. I'm a practicing Catholic, but kind of with a little c, so anyway, but I wanted to kind of be involved in the world. I was always the person that would get those, I forget what they call them, maybe the upfront magazines that they would give us in school. That was from like Times or New York Times, and they would have like little articles. They were kind of geared towards high school kids. I'd read those.
We didn't get those things in Alabama, man. So I don't know what you're talking about. Our newspaper was just one, it was double-sided, but just one page. We didn't get these fancy New York Times stuff, man. Get out of here. So that's super interesting. So did you, in high school and even in college, did you run for like student council and those kind of things?
Yeah, so I actually, again, kind of my fieriness and my passion, we actually started a fraternity my freshman year on campus, which is a big no-no. And if anybody knows anything about the fraternity scene at Carthage, we actually have one of the highest percentages of Greek participation. And it's because we have a lot of local sororities and fraternities. So most people who are in universities, they have no idea what that even looks like. And we brought in a colony, if you will, of the TEEK, so Tau Kappa Epsilon. And there was a counselor on campus who was a former TEEK as well, or always a TEEK. And so he kind of helped us do that. It led to a lot of problems. I mean, fights on campus, and I have a scar underneath my eye for, basically trying to step up and protect one of my leaders, not because it was a fight. I got cold cocked and all this kind of crazy stuff. So I was in the midst of political revolution, if you will, right out of the gate. And so I spent being a leader on campus for 3 years. I was the president of my fraternity. And then the fourth year, I became the president of our student body and for student council.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got to work directly with our president of our university, Mr. Campbell, Dr. Campbell, who's retired now. And I got to intern with the city of Kenosha with their mayor. And I won't tell you who I got a job opportunity with, but it was a really, really powerful congressman from that area as well. And so I definitely flexed the desire of the political scene, and we got a lot of stuff done. I was able to make campus safer, for our female people as well. We had, we made sure that there were view holes through the doors so that the kids, knew who was knocking to come onto the floor. We added security cameras all over campus. We reconfigured a entryway to our campus to make it safer. We made sure that all the peepholes, if you will, in the doors worked from our actual dorm rooms. I was able to secure some land for some upperclassmen dorms on campus to expand the number of students who went to Carthage, and all sorts of stuff while I was there. So I was really proud of those experiences. And actually, as a track coach, I was able to do that as well for Missouri in some different ways, in terms of leadership and moving our state forward in sport as well.
Yeah, I keep hearing that leadership and from your stories and positive change, and man, that is awesome. And this is on Carthage, so you're 22 at the max at this point. Man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Man.
So when I graduated, I had stars in my eyes, and I was like, well, man, I did all this stuff at Carthage. Well, I'm just going to do this, on the internet, the national governmental scene and all this kind of stuff. And so when I graduated, I worked locally. I turned down the job in DC because the money was so low that I wouldn't be able to live safely. And they kind of started my recruitment after they gave me the job. They kind of started it with a lie. They're like, oh, you're only going to work 40 hours a week. I'm like, look, I have been involved in politics enough at 22, 23 years old to know it's never 40 hours a week. It's sunrise, beyond sunset, if you're going to be great at what you do, especially if, you're not abundantly wealthy or have a lot of connections, And so I said, I'll go back to Missouri and do it. I got a bunch of people elected. It was a year in Missouri where we had the term limits were instituted, and that was the year where a bunch of people got term limited out. So there's a lot of changeover and opportunities. And so I came back to Missouri to do that, got a bunch of people elected. But what I found out through that process is I was like, man, there is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't feel comfortable with, and I don't want my name attached to these people later. But then that left me kind of unemployed without a job at that point.
And so you started working for McDonald's.
Well, I was working to supplement my income with the Walmart managerial program, and I got bumped up way up into that higher than I probably should have because of my resume from college. But when I was done, I felt like I was not prepared. And then the nail in the coffin for me was not that I wasn't prepared or that the people that I worked for liked me or any of that kind of stuff. Walmart actually treated me pretty well, but they were going to send me out to Topeka and to Wichita, one of those places. And I'm like, I chose to turn down a job in Washington, D.C. because my roots are in Missouri. I'm not going to leave and go somewhere else. So now no politics, no job, and I'm stuck.
So what in the world do you do? This seems, there's a lot of people right now possibly listening that are like, yeah, that's how I feel. I'm stuck. So what did you do to help get unstuck?
Well, you got to listen to your mom.
The best advice you could hear right there. People, just shut it off right now. That's it. Listen to your mom.
Yeah, just drop the mic.
That's it.
So my mom was a great educator. She's an educator in Parkway, and she won like the Pillar Parkway and Parkway Teacher of the Year, and they made up awards to give her. I mean, she was the real deal.
Wow.
And she always told me, Ryan, you should get into education. And I'm like, I can't fill your shoes. There's no way I can do that. I don't trust that my temperament is necessarily right for that. And I was probably right about that. Thankfully, it took me a little longer to teach than it was to coach. The coaching provided me grooming so that I could be a good person in the classroom.
So you're coaching at this point?
My mom talked to me about that, and I said, well, you know what? I don't know that I'm going to teach, but I'll split the middle. I'll go work for Coach Warren, who I love and respect so much, and I'll work for him. And this is before Twitter and Instagram and tweeting and texting. So when I showed up, it was actually not a real day of school. It was one of those professional development days. And when I walked in, Coach Warren was the first person that I saw, and he was sitting at a table with all of his assistant coaches. Now, I told you I'm a pretty religious guy, so I believe that there was some fate that led to that very moment when I walked in the door. And he's like, oh my God, Ryan, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I came here to talk to you and asked if you needed any volunteers. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's what we're here talking about. And so it only took a week and a half to figure out that my mom was right. And I loved every stinking day that I was coaching with Coach Warren. And I felt more value and more purpose. And I felt like I was a net positive for people for the first time in my life through that, which then meant I had to go back to school, get my teacher certification. And that took about 5 years. So I coached for about 5 years before I became a full-fledged teacher. And then I got to teach at Parkway Central, which also was a minor miracle in and of itself.
Did you not consider going and get like a grad assistant position for your grad work?
So my experience with my college coaches was not a good one. I was often injured, talented, and ornery, outspoken. So like I was a coach's nightmare in college for sure. And so there was no way that was going to happen, and if I could apologize to them because they were on the same path that I was as a young coach, you have this evolution and things, and, I'm sure they're 1,000 times better. And just like I hope to be 1,000 times better 15 years from now as a coach. So that was probably not going to happen because I'm sure they didn't like me most days when I was there, and I deserve not to be liked as a college athlete.
Well, I love that your persistence. You said it took you 5 years. I mean, many people would have quit, to be real frank. I mean, there's plenty of people. I was just reading a stat this weekend, and we're talking about grad work specifically here, and this is about undergrad, but the dropout rate. Let me see if you know what this is. It's an amazing number. Do you know what the dropout rate is for all colleges aggregate? So 2-year colleges, profits, nonprofits.
I mean, I would feel like it would be over 50%.
It's 40. Isn't that amazing? Oh, okay. That's amazing. Yeah. 40%. So there's plenty of people that have, 1 class, 2 semesters of grad work, and that's it. They have nothing to show for it. You persisted on and kept at it. That's probably a big deal.
It took me a little bit to figure out, first of all, where I wanted to go. I thought about going to Webster, but that's private college. It's expensive. So I ended up going to UMSL, which was a much more economic option for me. And I also wanted to make sure that I'm like, all right, I can't be in a building per se as a teacher yet. So what can I do? Well, I can be a TA. I can be a study hall monitor. I can be what they call a walking counselor. And I did that for 3 years at Kirkwood High School. But that meant while I'm building my educational resume to prove I'm worthy of hiring, that meant I had a limited amount of time with coaching on top of that I could do classwork. So I had to do chipping away at that big marble stone for my miracle of my life that I was trying to create. It took a long time to get that done. And if anything, if anybody who's listening can take any advice from what I'm saying is, do it the way that you feel best to get it done. Don't burn yourself out and be one of those 40% because you just want to try to get it all done at once. Have a plan and a path that that you can manage so that when it's finally done, you'll be in a good place with a great resume that allows you to get hired for the job that you basically went into education to get in the first place.
So that's really good advice. We just had Rodney Burks on the podcast a week or so ago, and I don't remember if it was part of the recorded part or unrecorded part, but he's 34 years old, and he was like, "Oh man, I'm supposed to be a legend. I'm supposed to be, seen as one of these guys that I admire, Mike Holloway's and such." And I was like, "Dude, you're 34." And so that weekend, someone published, I can't remember. Oh, it was who plays Iron Man? You should know this. This is Marvel.
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. Someone posted that at 34, they posted a picture of him in the court. He was, yeah, zero. He was, getting ready to go to jail for drug charges and what have you. And now fast forward, not even 20 years, I think it was, and he's a, 500 millionaire, and he gets paid way more than you and I will ever dream of to wear a costume and be Iron Man. And I tagged Rodney in it because I was like, see, I told you, you're just getting started at 34. I think to bring it back to what you said, we're so anxious to get it all started. I'm 20. Why don't I have it figured it out? Or I'm 30. Why haven't I got my life figured out? And it's like, man, you're just getting started. You're a babe. You're not even on the freaking starting line, keep digging in. So I love that, have a plan. Let's not forget what you said there, Ron. Have a plan, but make sure that plan is tailored to you. And that way you can ladder up and continue giving value and having success. Absolutely. That's super important.
And even building more off of what the Robert Downey Jr. theme, and when he was on Joe Rogan recently, it's this idea of faster alone or farther together.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And that really struck with me because it's like, that is totally true. Because everybody plays those mind games, the worthiness card, imposter theory, am I an imposter? Am I really doing what I do? Why is a kid at my school trying to go be with some other coach in a club because they feel like the grass is greener? Look, that stuff is gonna happen no matter who you are, no matter what level you are. Robert Downey Jr. was considered one of the best actors ever, and the dude was in jail and his life was pretty much over. And here he goes and has a resurgence through sobriety and all this kind of stuff. And we have to be okay with the patient progression to greatness. And like personally, just like Coach was saying that you talked about with him, one of the things I'd like to do eventually is coach college track later, but no one's ever called me. I've put out a lot of resumes, and one of those little things that hangs over your head, it's one of those little itches in my soul is, well, you don't have any college experience. And it's like, so all of this other stuff, doesn't matter. And then you could be that person and say, well, what did I make those decisions for? Well, I darn well know why I made those decisions. Right. My life is better. I have 2 beautiful children. I have a beautiful wife. I get to coach at my old high school. I get to change people's lives. I put 150 kids into college through sport. Like, we have to understand and have some perspective on there are reasons why these things happen. And I can be a grumpy guy, but I also am the dude with the degree in positive psychology. So I have this like weird yin and yang in my soul, but it's so important for us to not forget that the journey is really important and that you don't want to burn yourself out before you're worth the people you get to work with.
I think we've touched on it in the past. I'm not sure. I know I've had conversations with coaches offline about that imposter syndrome. It's that little voice in your head that tells you you're not supposed to be here. You're not good enough for that. You know what? F that voice. I'm telling you, that is not you. That was planted by someone a lot of times. And I'm definitely not talking about your parents here, Ryan, but a lot of times it's from our parents telling us we're not good enough, or don't talk to strangers, don't talk about money, et cetera, et cetera. And that becomes the voice like, oh, I can't ask for that job. I'm not supposed to make that much money or whatever. That little voice, get that bad voice out, man. We have to start being good to ourselves. I think that will help us, because we definitely need to be good towards other people for sure as well. We need to be nicer to other people.
And to that point, the one thing I would add to that is, just because we're being patient doesn't mean we don't ask for it. Doesn't mean we don't go for it. Doesn't mean we don't ask for help. I have all sorts of privilege, white male from a two-parent household, all this kind of stuff. But one of the things that my parents told me is, don't be afraid to pay a quarter more for first class. Don't be afraid to ask for something you feel that you deserve. Don't be afraid to go up and ask that girl out. The worst thing she's going to say is no. And this whole path as we're developing in this long life that we hope we all live with great experiences is going to be filled with us taking chances and going for those things. But while you're going for those things, you have to have a plan to know what you do with it if the door does get open, if the girl does say yes, if the person does ask you for the job, gives you the job. You
Mhm.
have to be ready, and you have to speak with a confidence that you are worth it. And my parents, even though I had only 3 friends in elementary school and I was picked on all the time and bullied, my parents never, ever let me doubt that I was loved and I was worth it. And that's so very important.
Wow. I, I, do you feel a sense of, I'm sure I'm blanking on the right word. Did you feel like you owe it to the kids that you teach and coach today because of what you were given from your parents? It's like, man, I didn't deserve that. They were awesome. I got to give this to you and your own kids, of course.
100%.
Mhm.
And one of my biggest worries of my life is like, I want to be as good of a parent that my parents were to me, to
Mhm.
my kids. And it's a hard balance because you're like, well, we got to discipline, we got to make sure that they're not being rowdy, but I want them to know that they're loved. Now, one of the studies that they talk about is, you know, a good parent versus a bad parent. When kids report on what was a good parent versus what was a bad parent, typically they say that the dad and mom were always happy when they were around, which meant you don't have to be around all that much, but when you are around, you need to be present, positive, and happy. Well, as educators and coaches, we might only have an hour a day or 2 hours a day, but God darn it, if we are present, happy, and positive to those kids and we make them laugh and we make them smile and we're on stage, then they're going to have a model of someone that they can grow to, even if they don't have a great parental situation. And we have a lot of kids in my school district. It's interesting because kids that come out from the city to our schools that don't have a lot, and we have a lot of kids that live within the community directly that maybe have too much, and so it's this weird balance of navigating self-control and self-belief simultaneously. And I always want those kids to know that they're loved and they're cared for and that they deserve these things, because I don't feel guilty per se. I feel very lucky. And so if I can be that person for those kids in that hour or 2 hours a day, I'm going to be that. I'm going to be that person. I'm going to save that life. I'm going to give that kid that opportunity because that's what I'm freaking there for.
You just elicited a regret from someone listening right now. Someone listening right now had your resume for a position at their college and said, he's just a high school coach. He doesn't have college experience. And right now they're going, oh, son of a, I could have had that guy and that attitude working with our kids, man. God, dog it. Wow. That's powerful stuff. I really love that. I'm real passionate about the people who choose to be coaches and they're off the track mentality. There's plenty of resources out there, including your book, Sprinters Compendium, on how to help teach someone to long jump farther and run faster and pole vault and all that kind of stuff. But we don't talk, in my opinion, as a former college coach and high school coach myself, I don't think we talk enough about the mental health, the physical health, relationship health, financial health of the person. We get so wrapped up. So I love, there's a lot of times I'll talk to coaches, male and female, by the way, because of specifically in college, because of the travel, recruiting, track meets, or boy, that was, I don't know if you heard that, man. The
I heard
loudest,
it.
okay, I thought a garbage can, but we don't have garbage cans out there. That was like the loudest thunder in the world. It must be about to just pour. Holy crap. Sorry. Focus. So, but the regret of not being around their kids because they are serving, they're selfless to 18 to 22-year-olds, a bunch of other people's kids. And they have a lot of regret because they're being selfish because they're taking that time away from their spouses and their own kids. I like that reminder, and that it's actually backed by, it sounds like I think you mentioned some kind of study of it's not about how much you're around the children or your children specifically. It's what is your attitude when you are around them? Are you happy? Are you showing love? Things like that. So I love that. Like maybe that just gives someone hope right now that they're like, man, I am on the road all the time because of X, Y, Z, including, by the way, this guy, I'm 130 nights a year on the road. So I'm a little bit in this boat. I don't go to all the track meets you guys go to anymore because we got to shorten them up. We'll have a whole episode about that one day. But anyway, but I wonder sometimes, like, man, I'm not around my kids, are they missing me, things like that. But I make sure I'm really hard working on when I'm home, I'm home. you know so maybe we just gave someone hope right there that, okay, you know what, I may not be home 40 hours a week, but every hour that I am pouring into my children, I'm pouring into my spouse, I'm pouring into my circle, whether your mom and dad and in-laws live around you, whatever. Maybe there's some hope there for people that are maybe not feeling so much hope right now.
100%. And the recognition of, like, my wife is a single mother for 6 months worth of Saturdays out of the year because of cross country and track is important. You got to figure out ways that you can find time. So, like Brett Bartholomew, who did the Conscientious Coach book, one of the things he says is, like, at 8:30, that's it. There's no more work. There's no more emails. There's no more text messages. And to be honest, I need to be better at that. But, part of the thing about me too is I'm trying to make money for my family through the books and all that kind of stuff. And so there's that. But, like, I was staying on Sundays and grading all these projects and papers and assignments and all this kind of stuff. And I had just spent a Saturday away. And I said, no more. I'm not going to do that because then I'm never really around my kids. So instead of doing Sunday, where my kids are awake and moving around all the time, I asked my wife, I said, hey, can I just stay late one day a week at work, and we'll pick out whatever the most convenient day of the week is ahead of time, and I'll stay late and I'll get as much of the stuff as I can get done so that Sunday I'm home with you and the kids. That made a huge difference. Coach Warren, who's my mentor, he never competes on Saturdays. Now, college coaches, you guys don't have that option. I get it, okay? But ways that he's worked around that is he hosts a lot of track meets, so he can set the schedule of events, the times, and you might say, oh, that's a lot of work, but it's like, yeah, but when it's time to go, you pick the day, whoever shows up, you pick the events, you set up the schedule, you set up the amount of entries, and whoever shows up, shows up. And so for me, I've done that. I'll do like a half and half, so I don't sit there for 12 hours at a track meet. We'll do half the events, we'll have 4 teams, and we call it a friend series. And so that buys me time. The kids can even get on the bus for the late bus, and it gets done like in 2.5 hours, and everybody gets to compete. We have like unlimited entries, but we only do like 7 events, and it gets done with 4 teams.
I think a lot.
And the other thing that Coach Warren taught me was that rotate the days. So I'll have Saturday meets, but then I'll have a Friday invitational or a Thursday invitational as well. And I just rotate it so that the coaches who work with you can go home and be with their families on Saturdays as well, and that they have breaks built in because you can control your schedule. And that's really helped kind of take care of some of that stuff at home.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems or issues we see in not just track and field, but in our own personal life is really a matter of priorities, right? Now on the college level, as you spoke, maybe it's Saturday because not because of we have to be away from our families, but because of the educational side. Well, if we do it on Fridays, we miss more classes or things like that. I don't know, but maybe there's just ways to balance it out, like you said, on switching up the days. Why does it always have to be on a Saturday? There's got to be some Fridays that are good for meets, so that kids themselves as well, can be with their families and friends and have that type of fellowship. Because you're right, man, with cross country, indoor and outdoor, I mean, it's all year. Let's be frank about it. As soon as we get back from NCAA's and USA's, July 1 starts, which for the college coaches, bam, you're right back into recruiting, and there is no summer. And then bam, the kids are back on campus. I mean, there is just no time. I'm really hopeful that this time during quarantine, where people were forced to not have a track season, which I hate that. I hate it more than anybody. Trust me. I hope that we took advantage of it and spent time with our families, spent time with our spouses, spent time with ourselves.
And to speak to that, I'm very hopeful as well. Like, that screen that you look at every day, as we're talking to a screen, but that screen that you look at every day is not the deal. You are itching to get outside. I've seen more kids and more parents walking and being outside and playing in the front yard and setting up their chair on the driveway. And I'm like, Mike, you and I went through this. I was like, that's the 1980s. That's what we went through growing up. And that's a way healthier lifestyle. And the kids are running around and jumping. And so as coaches, we know that's better, and people are riding their bikes. And sure enough, you find out that with COVID, if you're healthier, you're getting more vitamin D, more vitamin C, and frickin' exercise that also helps fight diabetes and lung disease and heart issues, which all lead to this gamut or a collage of things that you can do to fight this thing. I'm very hopeful that people have figured out, like, oh, that's really good. Or, man, I don't really need that extra weekend of competition. Or I don't really need that extra phone call to call that recruit. It's not that important. I can be more efficient and give my family and give myself more time. Like, my blood pressure and my heart rate has been very low in this whole situation. I was really worried because I'm so into this, as people are listening can tell. I was like, man, where am I going to be in 15 years? Like, can I keep burning this rubber? Can I keep hitting the road this hard with recruiting within my own building and my own kids and all this kind of stuff? And what I realized is, oh, wow, I like to garden. I like to mow my lawn. I like to be out and water my lawn and plant trees and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, I can still do that while I'm coaching. That needs to be a part of my life. That's therapeutic for me. That little extra downtime is good. And so hopefully everybody, now that this is the first thing, Mike, that anyone alive, unless they're over 100, or super elderly, has ever had to go through, that's really, really serious and inconvenient to our American life. And so my hope is that makes you, A, grateful, B, kind of look at things a little bit different, have a little bit more compassion for others, and that we can have a social shift. Now, that's going to be tough because of things that are going on, but I hope over the long haul, we can lean on that experience with people who are growing up and that are young people. Say, hey, remember how bad that time was, and everybody's really scared and worried. Think about how lucky you are now. Think about how grateful you should be. Have that positive mindset even in a bad situation.
Well, I can confirm with our stats that we have 0 people 100 years old or higher listening to us. So this includes you, everybody right now listening or watching on YouTube. So was Parkway Central your first teaching job? Like, after you got your degree, is that where you started teaching and coaching, or was there intermediary stop?
So full-blown teaching, yes. I worked at Kirkwood for 3 years. Kirkwood is awesome. I always say it's like the closest thing to a Texas high school in Missouri. They want to whoop your butt at everything. They're passionate about everything. They promote the heck out of kids. And so I had that 3 years before I got to be a full-fledged educator, immersed in the most positive, outgoing, prideful community in the St. Louis region. And so I felt like, even though I wasn't teaching, I was a walking counselor. So our job was to create relationships with kids, and, monitor the study halls and ISS and all that nonsense too. But the biggest thing was building relationships. But eventually, in the spring of 2000, the fall of 2007 was my first year teaching at Parkway Central. And I took a 0.6. It wasn't a full-time job, but I was already coaching 2 sports. And the thing was, if it wasn't for that plan that I had put in place and that resume, and taking time by building a career of, hey, I've been around kids, I'm good around kids, my references can actually reference to how I handle high schoolers, real stuff, not just of vocab salad that sounds nice, And there was a person that they actually wanted to hire at Parkway Central that had like a master's degree from WashU. For those of us listening, WashU is basically like Ivy level education. It's one of the best universities for medical in the entire world. Anyway, and when they interviewed me, they kind of just did it as a favor because of the coaching. My hiring principal, who actually was my grade level principal, so he knew me in a different way when I was in high school, he said, "We were surprised at how well you did, Ryan. We couldn't believe it." And I took that kind of as an insult.
I was going to ask you, how did you take that? Because we were both with that one, man.
So I was offended, but then the more I thought about it, is like, well, you're damn right. I proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm worth this job, that I've done everything I'm supposed to do. And when I went into that interview, I was ready with everything that needed to be said. And I did my student teaching, which I haven't mentioned, but I did my student teaching at Kirkwood as well, with probably the best teacher I've ever seen. And so through that experience, my student teaching experience was horrible. I was so bad. I was so unprepared. I made so many freaking mistakes, but I learned from all of those things. I never made those mistakes again. And because I had this cooperating teacher who was my mentor, he was so challenging of me that when I came out the other end of that, I was ready for that interview. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I was prepared for my classroom. So like when we go through all these horrible and terrible things, remember, like we should be thankful for the demons that come into our life, the problems that we face, because that's where we're going to learn the most about ourselves, where we develop some character. We also learn some tough lessons. And thankfully, I learned those lessons outside of Parkway so that they didn't have that kind of like, oh my God, this guy, experience. Right. And I was able to then do a great job in the interview. And then my first year teaching, I was very, very ready, because I had made all of those errors you can make. I mean, crazy things. I taught a lesson backwards, all sorts of stuff. I mean, just unbelievable.
If I knew history enough, I'd be able to make some kind of joke here about like, we won the war, and it's like, well, wait, Mr. Banta, we haven't even started the war.
What war?
About?
Right,
yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you start as a history teacher? Is that what you went in as?
Yes, I did. And thankfully, my first job was American history, which was my big strength when I came in as a teacher. And my cooperating teacher also had me do world history, which then I was prepared for. And so now in our American history is to freshmen. And I love freshmen because they're still enthusiastic. They have a healthy fear of, authority at that point. They have no context for what they're getting into. So when they come into my room, I can be like, boop, 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 and they're like, but then yes, and they follow through. But then over time, they go, well, this guy's really funny. He tells a lot of jokes. He makes fun of himself all the time. But there's a very good structure. And the kids are, the worst kids you come across, they desire structure. They want it, whether they want you to know it or not. They know that structure is important. They get it. And so I always say to my colleagues who want to get into education, you can go in like a lion, come out like a lamb, but never leave in doubt that you love them. And I tell kids on day one, I said, before we're done, I'm going to tell you I love you, and you're going to know I mean it. And I tell kids that all the time. And, there's things you could do to help manage the room and keep things going. But as long as they know you're genuine and you're authentic, that goes a long, long way to make up for whatever you don't have in curriculum or lesson design or whatever.
So you've been there, this would have been 13 years?
So I just finished up my 14th year of teaching, and this would have been my 18th season coaching, because I had one with Coach Warren as an assistant coach, and then the next year I got hired as the girls' head coach, which is kind of a funny thing too. And so I've been coaching there for the remainder of the time. So I'm almost coming up on 2 decades as a coach.
And you had flowing hair before you started teaching.
Oh, I had some hair, man. Yeah. I had a little bald spot in the back, but that bald spot is now the whole thing.
Before you tell us how you got to become the girls coach, high school, right? So girls coach. Looking back now, it's 2020, so you have experience on your hand to look back the last 14, 15, 16 years. What, if anything, can you gain from the experience of teaching and coaching these kids has changed as far as the kids? Are they really different kids? Is it different teaching? If anything, is there anything different in the last 15-ish years?
The outcomes of what we're facing now from children is different because parents are different. Parents don't want to parent. Parents don't want to spend time with their kids. Parents don't want to go outside and be inconvenienced. Parents.
And let's explain that you're paraphrasing here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it's one of these deals where that's when you come across a troubled child, more often than not, that's the issue. And the difference is that in my opinion, kids are born the same. We have the same genetic material. We have not evolved in 40 years to be all that different. And one of the things I always want parents and coaches and teachers to realize is when you're facing that really difficult kid, a kid you don't like that much. I tell kids all the time, I love you, but I don't like your decisions. I might not like you that much right now, but I absolutely love you. So you need to understand that difference. Like, I'm not liking this choice. But what I always try to tell people is, remember that kid who's a young adult was a baby in a diaper that wanted to be loved and was incredibly vulnerable as a living organism, that it takes to basically about the time you get them in high school where they could survive on their own. It wouldn't be great survival, but they might be able to make it on their own once they get into high school. It isn't really until they're like into their late 20s that they really figure this stuff out, you know? So that's something I want people to understand. And so most of the kids we work with in my school, I'm very lucky, I'm very blessed. I teach at one of the best public high schools in the country, okay? They're great most of the time. So really we're talking about a much smaller group of kids that we're worried about. But my idea of what's different is parents are different. You gotta lean in, you gotta be involved. Even if mom and dad aren't together, be involved. You know, no one's ever gonna be mad at you for wanting to be around more, to want to spend more time with your kids, to be happy when you're with your kids, to do stuff with them, you know, have structure and have rules. So that would be the biggest difference. And people are afraid to lean into some of those things. Like, hey, when every kid comes into my room, phones are put up, phones are away. I don't mind if a kid doodles. I have no problem if they're drawing on their paper, you know, and stuff like that. No big deal. But that black mirror that they spend 8 hours a day staring at, my job is to mitigate the time that they're spending with that and learning in a different way, because they got that covered. They're going to get that all day, every day. So as an academic, as an educator, as a coach, lean as far away as you can and not sacrifice your curriculum or your training plan away from that stuff, you know, because they're on that stuff all the time. So
I said caveat, you were paraphrasing. I actually meant you were generalizing
right.
a big swath there. But I do want to bring back up something you said.
Sure.
You said, you know, I love you, but I dislike your decision. I love that. I mean, I think it took me having kids to kind of have that same epiphany you got through studies and experience of, you know, when you look at someone and you're just angry at them for whatever. And, you know, now that I have kids, I look at them and go, oh, that's someone's daughter. Oh, that's someone's son. Like they were, that analogy, they were that little baby, that innocent, helpless, defenseless little baby at one point. And you're right. I love the person. I may disagree with the decision or the thinking, but I love the person. And I tell you what, as an educator, if you know, my kids are now, you know, I guess they're going to be in fourth grade and first grade. If my kids' teachers were to tell me that, and they do actually, we have a great school system here too, where I live here in Muhammad, that would set me at so much ease. It's like, oh, okay, you're right. My kids make bad decisions sometimes. They do things that I'm not happy with, but I always love them. So if my teacher or my coach can have that same attitude of like, man, I cannot believe you did this. That was wrong. You are awesome. Love you. This was wrong. Now let's figure out how to fix this.
100%. And the more that we can live that, the better we're going to be to everybody. Because I think, you know, in one respect, we're afraid to tell kids no. We're afraid to say that choice is bad because somehow that is wrapped up into who they are as a person. It's like, it's not right now. You know, it's our job to say that wasn't a good choice, to be critical of it, but be critical of it with love. Like, I am not going to stand for this because I love and respect you, you know? And I tell kids that when they're messing around in class. I mean, that's what I tell them, even the most difficult children, you know, that are way down on my list of the love list, you know, that I'm here to be that person for you, whether you like it or not. And I tell parents that I am going to discipline your child, but it's because I respect you, I respect them, and I'm not going to allow that. And we are so willing to be tolerant of so many things, but now it's gotten to the point where we're tolerating like things that we shouldn't tolerate. Like, hey, Johnny, why did you stab that kid with a pencil? That might be a conversation one time, but then it has to be followed up with some sort of discipline that keeps Johnny from doing that all over. And I feel like that is a thing that is different. And it is different because I think we're afraid to say those things. And then it's like trying to demean their characters. Like, no, I'm not trying to demean them. I'm doing this because I love them, because I want them to be better. And we have a limited window to make sure that these kids are ready to not get themselves in trouble, to make good life decisions for their partners, for their family, for their kids. And you are 100% right. When I had children, it changed my entire viewpoint on kids. Like, well, that kid's so misbehaved. If I had a kid, I'd do this, this, and this. And then your kid does it. And you're like, oh my God.
What the frick, man?
Yeah. And as coaches, what we can learn from that too is, like, you probably say that about some coach, why they make that or this or that decision. And then lo and behold, you're going to have an athlete, just like a child, who's going to challenge you. And now you got to make that decision. And it's not going to be as clear cut and easy, as you thought it was looking at that other person. And so that's perspective.
Did you get a chance to listen to Brooks Johnson episode on the Connections podcast?
Oh, absolutely. Any chance I get to listen to Brooks.
One of the many things that I learned from him, his saying, he said it was from actually another coach, but he said that if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. And that resonated with me, business here in the private sector, as a former coach, as a parent. And when I look at someone else's parent or kid, I'm like, well, why do they do that? Well, their parents must be da-da-da-da. And it's like, oh man, I don't know what's going on in their life. Who am I to judge?
Right.
Oh my God. It made me, like, in a good way, felt bad. Like, oh geez, I've been blowing it, man. I've been judging other people, and I'm not in their huddle, and they're not in mine. So if I expect them to show me grace, I guess I got to be giving other people grace too,
Correct.
I love something you said. I kind of heard it in a funny way of saying it, talking about kids and what maybe is different now in the 2020 kids versus the 2000 and 1980s and going back, et cetera. People complaining about kids and things like that. And, the people typically complaining are the ones who raised them. It's like, wait a minute, you don't like millennials? Well, you raised them. What, isn't it your freaking fault then? Like, what the heck, man?
But that goes to everything that we have as a problem, is we are so unwilling to take it on the chin emotionally. One of my assistant coaches said the best thing ever. She's like, you are a control freak. You need to let go. You do these things wrong. And I'm like, what? What did you just say to me? And I kept my mouth shut because, again, I wanted to keep this coach around. But then the more and more that I thought about it, I was like, dude, she's right. So how do I go about this? So a lot of us don't have that self-reflection that we need, and we certainly don't want to be like, I am definitely afraid of being the educator that has bad kids, my own children. Like, I don't want my kid being the one partying and dun, 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 and being crazy when they're in high school and making lots of bad choices. I'm like, oh please, because I on my mind as a child, when I was making decisions about where I was going to go and what I was going to do, my dad being a cop and my mom being a teacher, like, if I screwed up, everybody knows about it. And the worst people, you don't want them to know, because it's embarrassing. And I had that on my mind, and that kept me from making a lot of bad decisions. But I hope to God that I can instill that in my own children as well, because we need to reflect. It is very uncomfortable for us to say, I'm the one who screwed up. Like JFK, when the Bay of Pigs went down, he said it was my fault. And for whatever you want to say about JFK as a president, it's like, that's real powerful. When you have someone who can say it. We last year, I know we're not supposed to talk about training, but this is relevant, I promise. We had some handoffs that didn't go really well. And the kids were, getting real feisty at each other. And I said, it's not her fault. It's not her fault. It's my fault. I said, we haven't done this in practice yet because we've been working on all these other things. But I said, I swear to you, by the time we're done, we're going to be one of the very best teams in the state. And part of that's going to be because of our handoffs. And I'm going to make sure that we address this, because this is a problem that I've created. It's not her, it's me. Now, do they own a little bit of that too? Of course. They already know that. You don't have to say it. They know it. And as long as you take care of it, they're going to remember that moment, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was really cool that you did that. I get it.
How'd that turn out?
Great. We broke a school record in the 4x2 by a lot. We ran the second fastest 4x1 we've ever ran.
Nice.
Great, cool stuff.
Very cool.
Really cool stuff.
Well, that's a good segue. So take us back. You become the girls head coach there. How'd that come about? You said it was kind of a funny story.
Well, so the guy who was there before me, he started to put in a pretty good program. One of the things that used to frustrate me, though, when I was a high schooler, is I felt like girls' athletics in general was second-class citizenry at my school. And I remember, like, there was this young lady, her name was Elena Toledo. And Elena Toledo is still probably the fastest human being I've ever seen on two legs. She was unreal. And she never did sports. Nobody ever talked to her. Nobody ever recruited her. Nobody ever. And I'm like, this kid is amazing. And she was a kid that wasn't per se the race or ethnicity of a kid that you would think would be really, really fast. And so, like, there's a whole lot of layers in there that kind of informed me as an adult, as a coach, that this is something we should do. Well, anyway, Coach Harris comes in, who was before me, and they start to go and do really well. They had one bad year right before I took over the program, and that's just because they had a bunch of injuries and, got just, for the 1 year out of 5, stuff like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, he ends up getting an amazing job as an administrator over an entire school district. So now there's a power vacuum. None of those coaches are going to come back because they love Coach Harris. They asked at Parkway Central basically every breathing human with a pulse if they wanted to be the girls' track coach, and no one wanted to do it. Not a person. Now, I asked, because I had such a great experience with Coach Warren, and again, looking back on it, I was like, man, how thirsty was I to be like, I'm going to take this with one track season as a coach. But I asked him, I said, I want to do this. I want this position. I think I can take the girls in this direction. I think these are some things we could do. Again, basically just based around hard work more than anything. And months go by. And earlier, I actually had a job as the cross-country coach for a small private high school, and they had offered me to be the track coach as well in the spring. But I knew how good this group of girls were. I knew that I wanted to be in the building, and I felt like I could do some really special things with them. So I was very hungry to get that done. And I let them kind of air it out. And I just kind of thought, are they going to answer? I call them up. And I finally said, because it was getting close to the beginning of the season, really close. And they still had not had a head coach. I said, look, if you guys don't hire me, I got a job offer from Whitfield to be the head coach over here for track, but I really want to be with you guys, and I'll take a pay cut to come, be your coach and do all this kind of stuff. But you got to let me know, and I got to know now. I didn't need to know now. I hadn't talked to the Whitfield coaches in months either. But I painted him as, I told the white lie because I knew what I wanted, and sure enough, they called me back in an hour and a half and gave me the job, but I mean, they asked everybody, and nobody wanted to coach girls track. Now, what's amazing, and we'll talk about the progression, I guess, but, we're now one of the very best programs in the state of Missouri in all sports. I've been blessed to work with numerous state champions and All-Americans, and God has blessed me with so many opportunities and allowed me the opportunity to screw up too and then learn from it. But I think back on, like, what would that situation have been if I didn't ask, I didn't kind of paint them in a corner, I didn't speak strongly about what I was and who I was going to be? Where would we be? Where would my life be? How different would my life be if I wasn't the head coach there? I probably would have never become a teacher. I probably would have never gotten into Parkway Central, which is an amazing public high school in Missouri. It's just those small moments become so big in someone's life. It's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. And it kind of paints that full circle picture back of being ready for when the opportunity presents itself and to ask for that opportunity.
Correct.
Wow, man. So how has it gone? You've done 12, I'm sorry, I'm losing track. 13 seasons, 14?
So I've been coaching there for 18 years
18
total, and then 17 years as the head girls coach. And, we've been top 5 times in the state of Missouri. We've, like I said, set a couple state records. We've won 5 conference titles in a row. It looked like before COVID, it had been 6. We've won 12 district plaques in 13 years. which is your regional for Missouri. You got to be first or second to do that. So we've done some really great things. And I've been very lucky to have great assistants, to have a great community of parents and kids. And it's been fun.
Yeah, it definitely is not in a vacuum. While you are the figurehead as the head coach, it definitely takes assistant coaches, and especially on the high school level, it takes parents and family, and ultimately, to be honest, it takes the kids. They got to be able to perform. They got to be able to buy into the program and run and jump and throw.
Yeah, and I mean, we tell them all the time. I'm like, coaches can make you great or good, but you decide whether you're great. And for us as a program now, our philosophy is we just want to be a net positive across the board. And where we were at one time and then where I was at another time and where you are in the future is going to be very different. And so hopefully as you move forward, you evolve. And what's really interesting for me, my evolution has been the strongest in just my relationships in management of the entire thing, beyond the X's and O's. My biggest growth has come from how to manage people, my assistants, my athletes, their parents, and you're going to go through those evolutions as well. You might not be as good at the X's and O's early on, but you might be really good socially intelligent, going back to those multiple intelligences, right? But then you've got to figure out where your evolution needs to go to continue to level up and continue to get better and better and better as you move through. And at the end, everybody's going to be like, oh my God, they're just good because they've got all that talent. And that becomes one of the best compliments you could ever get, because you and I know how much it takes to make that work. And it really is a lot of other people. You cannot do it all by yourself. Your assistant coaches are going to be incredibly important, and they've got to feel valued, and you've got to promote them when you can. You've got to push them positively into education when you can. And you've got to give them a setup where they can be successful, which sometimes means not giving them the whole thing right away, maybe giving them little parts. Hey, you get to take care of these days. You get to take care of the weight room. You get to take care of the warm-up. It all depends on the person. But that management of people and how you raise them up is so valuable to be a great coach and to be a manager of all of these different things.
As people are making connections through this podcast and starting to kind of put the dots together and be like, yeah, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of want to put that back in. Help us out. Give us those two books. I think you said his name was Howard Gardner. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's Howard Gardner. He did a thing on multiple intelligences, and then the other one was, and I'm probably butchering this, it might not be this, but you'll clean it up for me on the YouTube and on the notes. The other one is the 6 intelligences of the future. And so the six minds of the future. And it's on Vern Gambetta's list of books like over a decade ago. And so it's not the easiest read.
Yeah.
But what I look at it is like, again, it's like, okay, I'm moving to the future. I'm navigating the future. Where do I fit amongst these 6 minds? Well, for me, it was synergistic, the synergistic mind. It's like, I am not probably going to create anything super special that's brand new on my own, because I am not a research scientist. I'm not a human biologist, and I'm not a political theorist necessarily. Okay. But what can I do? I can bring all of these different things together into one spot and tie it all together to create the greatest cultural atmosphere, coaching experience, training design that I can for these people that are a part of my life who would ever want my help or who would ever be influenced by me. I can bring this. So that's why I asked you to be in my book, because you had a different perspective as a USATF instructor versus somebody like Tony Holler, that's a minimalist guy, to my buddy Sean Burris, who's a maximal guy, to people that didn't even coach track, like Yuri Vershansky's daughter, who now takes on his work with plyometrics and the shock method. It's like, okay, so if I'm going to put these things together, I want to do this so that everybody understands. And I think that that's what we miss in the global situation that we've got going on right now, that we try to be so bipolar, as opposed to like, there's like all sorts of different things between A and B. And then there's things that are coming out from different directions that need to be considered to really make the situation the best that it can be. And you're not going to be great or wholesale knowledgeable about all of those things, but you can be curious and be nuanced and then pick things that you get better at as you move around so that your scope becomes 360 degrees when you're considering choices in programming and education versus just the two eyes straightforward locked in with a Batman helmet on, you know.
As you were thinking about, how did the book start? Was it always going to be a book? Was it going to be a book you wrote? How did Sprinters Compendium start?
So I got an opportunity to write on Elite Track. While writing on Elite Track, I became friends with Carl. Carl and I had talked about a lot of different, because he's just like, I mean, he is a technophile, he is a bibliophile, he is, I don't know how the man writes as much as he writes every day. I don't get it. He's like, maybe he can pop in and out of the dimension and find time. I don't know. It's crazy. But from there, I always looked at, man, the Dr. Daniels running formula was so flippin' helpful. Where is that book for sprinting? And I think part of it was this idea of, again, bias, both experientially, that most coaches didn't sprint that are high school track. A lot of times they're distance coaches, you know, or something else. The fact that like people just believe you're born this way because, you know, like my race with Nodrick Tankins, you know, we were both super fast as little kids. And it's like, well, that's just what you are. Sure. But good coaching makes those people faster. Everybody can get faster. How fast they get might be genetically limited, but the improvement of everybody is pretty much the same. You know, there's some people that don't improve, but that's, again, based on genetics. So then let's find what they're best at. Pretty much almost everybody can be good at some level of athletic game or pursuit. All right, anyway. So I wanted to bring those different minds and different opinions together all in one place. But before I even really went down that path to commit to writing this book, through Elite Track, on the message boards, I got to be friends with a lot of different coaches. And I proposed a thing called the Wooden Project, which John Wooden, speaking of education and multiple minds and multiple of intelligences, he would go out every off season and try to improve an aspect of his coaching in a very narrow area. And then he would go and get the 10 best people at that pursuit of basketball in that narrow area. And then the deal was, if you answer all these questions, I will give you all of my answers to these questions, and then you'll get the other 10 coaches' answers to these questions as well. So I'm like, why don't we do that for track? First month we did it, we got over 100+ pages of stuff. And then that led me to go, oh, and then I shared it with everybody. And I was like, that were participants, only the participants. So that's the value of being in this club, so to speak. And I was like, oh, there's something here. And oh, some of these really good coaches aren't even people that are real famous. This guy's great. Let me investigate. Ooh, he's a high school coach or a club coach. Then I went to the Olympic Training Center in 2012, and I was sitting around with a bunch of coaches. We were talking about different stuff, just getting to know each other like you and I are talking here. And one coach brings up an article. He's like, yeah, this article really spoke to me about sharing kids between a club and a high school coach. And I was like, oh, you know who wrote that article? This guy. It was me. You don't even realize you're talking to the guy. Now, I, of course, didn't say that. But on the inside, I was like, oh, yeah, I said, oh, that was my article. That's really cool, you know, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but when I went home talking to my wife, I went, oh, man. I said, Michelle, I said, I'm excited and scared. I said, one, people are actually reading my stuff. Two, I better make this stuff a little bit better grammatically, which is still a problem in the book. But, you know, I have a learning disability called dysgraphia, which makes it really, really hard for me to write. So that was part of the challenge of finishing this book, too, is it's basically people told me all my life that I had this disability. And I'm like, well, damn that. I'm going to write this book anyway and prove it to myself. And then I can use that story with kids who come across me later that they're like, I can't write. I'm a terrible writer. It's like, yet.
So am I.
You know,
Guess
yeah,
what?
we get
Yeah.
better. You know, it just takes practice. You're again, just like that sprinter, you may never catch
Mm.
Usain Bolt, right? Or Ernest Hemingway, but you can be better than most of the people here. And to be
Mhm.
truthful, writing is going to be one of the most important things as we move into the future to really explain yourself in a long form.
Mm.
You know, we've seen that, right? The rise of podcasts like this are
Mm.
popular because people desire long form,
Mhm.
nuanced conversations as opposed to 280 characters, because that gets you in trouble because you can never explain exactly what you're trying to say.
Right.
Writing in long form is the same way.
Hmm.
And so I realized, okay, there's something here. There isn't a book like this, even though there's lots of books on ability and speed. There isn't a book at this depth. And again, people were pressuring me. When is this going to get done? This needs to be done. You got to give yourself a time limit. And I eventually got an opportunity to talk to Steve Magnus. And I said, Steve, what, with his first book, I said, what would be your advice from the first time you wrote this book? Most powerful, most important thing. He said, don't put limits on your time.
Hmm.
Make sure that when it's done, you feel good about it being done, you know? And so I was like, okay, well, as I'm writing this book, I realize it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, but I'm also making progress.
Hmm.
And I'm taking this part and filling it in, you know, and I'm like, I'm going to get it done. It's going to get done. And that's why, you know, again, with the grammar, I could have spent another year cleaning it all up. And I had 2 people help me edit it. And there were still errors in there. But I'm like, you know what? I'll go back and do that. I'm not going to let progress be victimized by perfection, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah, I see that all the time where they let perfection get in the way of execution. And it's an ego thing if you think about it.
Yeah.
I want to be perfect, so I can't publish my podcast. I can't write this article. I can't do X or Y or Z because it's got to be perfect. And it's like, who are you? We're fallible humans, man. You ain't gonna be perfect. Who do you think you are, man? Yeah,
Right. And
absolutely.
that endears you to people, that those imperfections are okay. One of the things I hate to see is when people start dunking on people on social media when they make a mistake, you know, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, yeah, it's really easy to talk trash now,
Mhm.
you know, but like we're all humans. And if we don't go through those mistakes, we don't get better. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, it's not about winning and losing. It's about winning or learning. It's great to win, but you don't learn a lot through winning. You learn the most by being challenged. I'm a much better coach now because there are better coaches around me. You know, they're making me have to dig deep and find ways to get better so I can continue to keep beating them. And like some coaches have said, I wouldn't have wrote that book because now you're giving away all these secrets. I go, but it's not the recipe,
Mhm.
it's the cook. It's the freaking cook. So if I'm more than a trainer and I am a coach, track and field coach, then I'm going to still be able to be successful. But they're going to force us all to be better. And we're all going to get better. And then what's the point of what we're doing anyway? We're never going to be famous per se doing this. It's because we want kids to have a fundamentally better experience than we had. Not only to make them faster, but to make it more fun too.
Well, I'll say that you were wrong there. Coming on to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast is going to make you famous. That's why Mike Holloway joined us. That's why Judd Logan joined us. Brooks John. They wanted to be famous, so they come to Gill and the podcast, man. So how dare you say that? Uh, how many years it's been published now? 4 years, I think. 3, 4.
So yeah, August of 2017.
So
So
3
we're
years.
coming up on very close to 4 years. Yeah.
What's been the feedback?
I mean, knock on wood, it's been very, very positive. I think because I've worked hard to try to be a positive dude, that I think most people who would have critiques have been kind, and most people have been more than kind. I mean, I get lots of wonderful messages that make my day. Hey, I had a kid and I had your book and we did this. Hey, I'm a father of this young lady and this happened. And it just makes
That's so
my
awesome.
flipping day. And what's cool is I get to see who buys the books. And so then what for most of them, the Amazon books, Kindle, I don't know where they're going, but I can see, and then I can go and look up, hey, how is their progress? Like we had a coach in Missouri that had one of the very best teams in the state in Class 5, and they got really good in one season with the same kids. And I was like, and they bought 2 of my books because the boys and girls coaches bought the books. And I'm like, that's freaking cool, because those kids got an experience that they might not have gotten through better training and a real hungry coach who wants to continually get better.
Yeah, kudos to him. Yeah, or her.
So exciting. So those things have been great. I mean, I get compliments all the time, and it's humbling because what I thought it was going to be is what it became.
Oh.
I wanted to truncate the learning experience for coaches to help athletes be better, to help them not be injured, and to improve the physicality and the physical health of all the young people they come in contact.
So as we look into our crystal ball and you like to have plans, what does the future look like for you with regards to, is there another book coming out, college coaching? What are we thinking? What's in the plans?
Well, college ADs listening to this podcast, it's okay to hire high school coaches.
Yes.
Oh, they don't know how to recruit. Yes, they do. They do it in their hallways all the time. Oh, they don't know how to manage all the time. I'm a high school teacher. I work all day, all night, and then go coach. Oh, they don't know how to talk to people. I have to talk to parents and kids that don't like history all the time, right? So that's a thing. It would be nice. Maybe after retirement, later down the line, I would like to be able to coach somewhere in the St. Louis area. There was a job that opened up at Edwardsville. They hired someone else. I did put my resume in because I just want to get interviewed. I just want to say, hey, what does this look like? In terms of books, I'm thinking about making a companion to the compendium. So that's a mouthful, but just kind of like charts for like training, suggestions on plyometrics, charts for the weight room, suggestion on percentages, RPE, rate of perceived effort, with all of that, swimming and biking as well. So when you have an athlete and they're at a world record level, and then, down from there, because they had a book called Running Tracks that was really great, that had a bunch of charts and stuff like that. And I use that all the time, but the recoveries that are in that book don't match up with what I see and what science says in terms of the effort and the rep. So I think that there's something there to be bought. And I think it would help everybody in all sports, not just track and field. So that's something I'm batting around. I'm batting around a podcast as well, as we talked about, but I've got to put time aside and I got to let the person talk and not me talk so much. And that's an acquired skill. I'm trying to get better at all the time. So those are things, and I'd like to win a team state title. And unfortunately, we were ranked number 1 this year going into the season. So this is probably our best chance ever in track. And we had a rough go of it in cross country. Our cross country team was, they're great girls and they were really hardworking, but it was one of our rebuilding years. And so but I was like, but in track, we're going to be really good. We're going to win a state title, and that'll be exciting and fun and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm super hungry for cross country, because I'm like, I'm going to make my girls monsters, and we are going to have huge improvements, and we're going to build off of everybody running around, trying to avoid the COVID and get outside. And we're going to build some thoroughbreds this fall. And hopefully next spring we can make another run at the state championship, because my best kids are coming back, my top flight kids. We just won't be as deep.
How many seniors did you have?
A lot. They had 12.
No.
12.
Well,
and they all had all-state experience.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But they say delayed gratification is better. So 2021, it's going to feel like 2 trophies.
Well, and that'll be bulletin board material, like protect the culture, protect the team, unfinished business.
Mm.
Let's go out here and do what we were supposed to do last year. Let's make it happen, make it ours right now, in spite of the situation.
I thought you were going to say bullet board material, like in football, the coach says, our kid will say, we're going to win the game. And so they put that on the,
Right.
I thought you were going to put like COVID-19 cancel season, put that on the board.
Well, I mean, yeah. If you could hate anything,
Let's
we could hate that virus.
Coronavirus, who's boss? We're going to have a season. Well, if anybody is listening now and they want to get a hold of you to purchase the book, I do recommend it. I actually, again, was blessed to be involved in this group, in this book. Hope I added value to it. Appreciate the opportunity to add value to it, Ryan. You blessed me with a copy, and so I only felt right to bless someone else with a copy. So I had a high school coach friend of mine reach out and was like, hey, you're in track. Is there a book I should have or whatever? And to your point about, what, I just want to give value and his kids will get better because of this book. Sent him that book. And I know he's reached out to you. It's been a connection for you. And it's just been really awesome to see, Ryan, your network, not so much that your network grows. I mean, that's one thing, but that you have added value to your network. You're so selfless in giving away information. And I think sometimes to your detriment, to be real frank. But I think that's a check mark of a good person, who's someone who wants to raise the, they say a raising tide raises all ships, right? So if we're raising the bar of education for coaches of track and field, well, we're going to have better athletes, we're going to have better coaches, we're going to have better relationships. Just the whole thing gets better, man. And how can that be a bad thing, to be real frank, So I really appreciate what you do in that regard. So how could someone maybe get in touch with you or purchase the book? What's the best routes?
Well, first of all, thank you for those wonderful, beautiful comments. And thank you for this platform that you've created for young coaches, old coaches, coaches that looking for direction. This is an awesome podcast that will help a lot of people. And like everybody was saying, talk about training. Training's important, but also the life that one lived can be much more valuable to a person as well, right? Because those training 100%. Manuals, they're out there. But life and how we pursue it, how we navigate it is so very important. And yeah, if somebody beats me because I give them stuff, great. Because I've been bettered and beaten other people because they've gave me stuff. Right. There are coaches who are out there who have a scarcity mindset. I'm not going to be that person anymore, ever. It is growth mindset from here on out because we want to make people's lives better. With that being said, people want to get a hold of me that have questions or have ideas or things they want to talk about. They can reach me at Twitter at Sprinters Compend. So the word's so long, they cut me off. And so Sprinters Compend, so you end with the N. And they can also meet me or reach me at my YouTube page, which is Bantasmo 1978, which I put all my videos and my talks, and I'll do like a 5 thought, or hey, this is what a workout is. And I actually have to work through a bunch of questions from a podcast that I did or debate that I did. I got to work through some questions, and I'll be doing that. So you can find me there. And then I'm on Instagram at ryan.banta. And then my Facebook, I'm maxed out with 5,000 folks, but I post most of my stuff on my board there as well.
Humble brag.
Yeah.
He's maxed out. You did not make the cut if you ain't there.
I want it to be more. I understand why they want to limit that because there's dangerous stuff going on social media, but it would be nice if they could jump it up just a little bit because
they put a cap on it. So again, social media is kind of one of my things I really like and love, to be real frank. So they put a cap on your personal because they want it to be intimate. Like it shouldn't be 5,000 to be real frank. You do not know all 5,000 of those people. Just like I don't know the I only have 1,000. I'm no Ryan Banta, but I don't know all 1,000.
Yeah.
But now, if you were to create a page that has unlimited amount, that's why they always suggest. Some people will take their business as a personal page on Facebook. Well, you're limited to 5,000. So if you want to have more than 5,000 people like and follow your page, you'd want to create a business page. So you could create a Sprinters Compendium page like that. However, I bet it wouldn't even get close to the same number that you do, because I don't think the book is the special sauce. I think it's the author that's the special sauce. The videos that you do, and again, for a guy who's not in coaching anymore, I don't watch all of them, but you do so many, and they're not 10-second, 15-second videos of make sure your kids run. It is, hey, top 5 things when building a cross country program, top 10 things for strength endurance for long sprint, or what things like that. It's really value added stuff. So I love that you're putting those things on YouTube and stuff like that. So that's awesome.
Thanks, Mike.
So as we wrap up here, I said I had a note here, buddy. So not only were you in the choir, you teach history raps, which, by the way, have you ever seen epic rap battles of history? You had to.
Yes. Oh, of course. Well, I wish I could show it to my classroom when they do the rap, right?
Yeah.
I tell them, I said, hey, with your parents' permission, you can go to epic rap battles of history to get some ideas.
If you've never seen epic rap battles of history, you got to go on YouTube right now. It's the best thing in the whole world. Some of them are stupid, but most of them are genius. These 2 guys, they sold out though, and so it's not as good, and I don't even know if it's still going on anymore. But anyway, you were in the choir, you teach history, or you encourage history rap, and you said you have a really good rendition of Mama Said Knock You Out. And it sounded like Mama tried to knock you out by making
yeah, she's Italian.
And you had to take your time. So why don't you give us your best rendition of the
Oh, yeah. Without music, it beats everything, but we'll go ahead and go.
That's right. What you talking about?
Oh, man. Don't you call this a regular jam. I want to rock this land. I'm going to take this itty bitty world by storm, and it's just getting warm. Just like Muhammad Ali, they call me Cassius. Watch me bash this beef like a stone. Don't you know I have beef with? Why do you riff with me, the maniac psycho? When I pull out my Jimmy, get ready, because it might go blow. How do you like me now? The Ripper will not allow you to get with Mr. Smith, don't spit. Listen to my gear shift. I'm blasting, outlasting, kind of like Shaft. You can say I'm shafting. Old English filled my mind, and I came up with a funky rhyme. I'm going to knock you out.
That's it.
I was going to knock you out. Mike's going to knock you out. The podcast's going to knock you out.
I hope to never be put on the spot for Ice Ice Baby, but you're a great sport for doing that, Ryan. I love that to death. I hope someone's going to be like listening halfway and be like, he's not going to do it, and they're not going to listen to the whole podcast, and you have missed out. Whoever you are, you stopped listening to the podcast 30 minutes, 40 minutes in, and you missed Ryan Banta here. Ryan Banta. Kick it with the Mama Said Knock You Out. Ryan, thank you so much, man. I'm so blessed that you would allow me to share your story. I don't take it lightly when guests come onto our show. It's a very humbling and trusting experience for me to be able to share the story with others so that it helps others. That is the key. It is named Connections Podcast for a reason. It is to connect you. So if you're listening and you hear Ryan and something resonates with you and you think you can get better by being connected with Mr. Ryan, you need to reach out right now. Take that leap of faith. Be prepared, because he will. He's a connector, man. He will connect with you, and he'll help you get better. And selfishly, you're going to make him better as well. That's the real key to it, man. We get better, stronger together.
Absolutely.
Ryan Banta, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Have a great day, guys.